It's been over 23 years since the original release of Final Fantasy IX, and time has only served to create a real sense of reverence around this specific installment into the franchise. Billed as a love letter, Final Fantasy IX would incorporate many elements and illusions that paid tribute to its 8 predecessors, but at the same time, it would still be very much in tune with the modern gaming experience, featuring cutting-edge graphics and a fast-paced battle system. It was this intriguing combination that would help Final Fantasy IX to differentiate itself against its contemporaries, but with so many layers present throughout, it's not too surprising that there are countless details hidden within the game. Beyond that, due to when and how Final Fantasy IX released, there are also a plethora of curious details surrounding the creation and subsequent promotion of the game, and it means there are plenty of stories to tell relating to how and why certain decisions were taken. So strap yourselves in as we dive into some fascinating pieces of trivia relating to Final Fantasy IX, and we're going to kick things off with a glitch that, even after all of these years, has still not been fixed. In most older Final Fantasy games, glitches were rather commonplace. But while some bugs could potentially be fatal to a save file, others would be relatively harmless, serving as mere inconveniences. One such glitch involving Steiner, and to a lesser extent Beatrix, would fall into this latter category, and it would be known as the Thunder Slash glitch. Thunder Slash was a sword art ability that Steiner could learn from the Defender and Ragnarok weapons. It would also be a Seiken ability for Beatrix. However, for some reason, Thunder Slash would be affected by a bug that would see the move assigned a base accuracy of 0, something that would mean the attack would almost always miss. After digging deeper, fans found that the bug stemmed from Thunder Slash being incorrectly defined as a gravity spell, meaning it would perform fractional damage as opposed to weapon-based damage. This meant that the skill could not utilize the weapon's accuracy value and would instead have to rely on its own accuracy, which would be set to 0%. Despite this, there was one condition where the ability would land: if either Steiner or Beatrix's level and magic stats were higher than the target enemies and the enemy's magic evasion stat was low enough. It meant that even though the ability had potential, for the most part it would be useless. There are many theories as to how the bug came to be, but perhaps the most interesting aspect is that despite many other Final Fantasy IX bugs being fixed over the years, the Thunder Slash glitch has persisted. And this is all the more surprising considering there have been numerous re-releases and even a pseudo-remake as the game was recreated in Unity for its release on mobile devices. The other frustrating element is that when faced as a boss, Beatrix can deliver Thunder Slash without any issues, something that showed the player what they were missing out on. When the original Final Fantasy was introduced in the United States, the response was quite positive. But due to numerous logistical issues, even though there were plans to localize and release games like Final Fantasy II, III, and V in North America, only 2 subsequent games would be released in the 16-bit era, and their sales were nowhere near as impressive. The sales of Final Fantasy VII then dwarfed everything that had come before, with a huge marketing campaign used to make gamers across the continent aware that something special was within their grasp. Having made this massive breakthrough to overseas markets, Square would continue to focus on North America, and amongst other things, they would even join up with Toyota for a pretty unique giveaway that would see fans of Final Fantasy VIII given the potential to win a brand new car. With Final Fantasy IX, Square wanted to go the extra mile, hosting 2 promotional events. On the 8th of October, this would see them host the Final Fantasy IX Consumer Demo Day event, which would allow fans to go hands-on with the game. This was then followed up by a special launch event on the 13th of November, where attendees could even purchase a copy of the game a day earlier than its official North American release date. Both events would have an incredible turnout, but perhaps the most unique aspect related to what became known as the Vivi-mobile. Someone within the marketing team decided it would be fun to fill an entire car full of Vivi plushies, with fans tasked with guessing how many there were in the car in total. The correct answer was 1,228 Vivi plushies, and the winner, Mike Green, won a PlayStation 2, alongside a collection of goodies including jackets, CDs and games, as well as exclusive merchandise that was no longer available for sale. Now, as the Final Fantasy franchise developed, more and more time and effort began to be invested into lore and world building. And with the franchise venturing onto the PlayStation, this came to the fore. But with Final Fantasy IX, the developers really wanted to kick things up a notch. The objective was to create a rich, immersive setting that felt alive and populated. And to ensure this was delivered, time was spent on creating an expansive world map that would feature unique civilizations and numerous connected towns and cities. But they didn't just stop there, as to ensure those towns and cities felt believable in terms of their size and scale, literally hundreds of NPCs would be created. This would end up being a huge undertaking, as not only would there be many more NPCs featured in 9 than there would be in Final Fantasy 7 and 8 combined, the majority of them would be given specific names, and this would be a purposeful act. Scenario writer Kazuhiko Aoki would later reveal that the writing staff placed so much emphasis on this aspect of the game that they actually didn't really differentiate between the main characters and the supporting NPCs. And by giving them all names, they felt compelled to develop each of them so that their individual stories would come to life whenever they came on screen. This would then feed into the prominent themes of life and death featured throughout Final Fantasy IX, as the idea of these NPCs each having their own individual identities will be an important part of giving Gaia itself its own identity. For any Final Fantasy game, it's commonplace for certain concepts or ideas to be discarded or modified to some extent during the development phase. Final Fantasy IX would be no different, and it meant that even though it would be more refined than its predecessors, plenty of dummied elements would still exist to give a flavour of some elements that didn't quite make the cut. Perhaps one of the better known cuts would be the balloon collecting minigame featuring Vivi, but many would be more obscure, and one of the most intriguing related to Baku. After discovering Princess Garnet had gone missing right at the beginning of the game, Zidane would insist on finding her before leaving the forest, but he would be met with opposition from Baku. In an unused segment, players could have selected whether they wanted Zidane to look for Garnet or listen to Baku's advice. If the latter choice was selected, they would have then been greeted with a cutscene showing Zidane and Vivi sleeping, but it would have shown that Zidane would have been haunted throughout the night due to his decision. Based on how Zidane's character would end up being portrayed, it's perhaps understandable as to why this concept was removed, but it's a curious peek behind the curtain that shows the various steps taken to ensure characters are developed in the right way. Beyond this, some other data mines would reveal deleted full-length ATEs, including one titled Steiner's Bitterness, which was basically him just being upset about the wrecked Prima Vista, and another called The Treetop Town of Clara, which featured an exchange between Freya, the King of Burmecia, and the High Priestess of Clara. Continuing with the subject of scrapped game content, there would be another interesting element within Final Fantasy IX that would ultimately not make the final product. In Disc 3 of the game, Zidane and the party would split up to confront the 4 elemental Shrine Guardians as they sought to reach Terra. It would see Zidane and Quina assigned to take down Lich, the Earth Guardian, with other pairings including Vivi and Steiner and Garnet and Aiko. But even though it would have been very interesting to see how gameplay would have adapted to these rather unique pairings, the player would only have the chance to face the Earth Guardian as a boss, with the rest of the Guardians defeated off-screen. Based on the prospect and the history relating to the 4 fiends within the franchise, this would prove to be an interesting choice, but it seems as though it wasn't always the plan. Amongst the dummied content, data miners found plans for battles against not just Lich, but against all 4 of the Shrine Guardians, and beyond the dummied content, concept art would even be revealed that showed artwork of each respective Shrine Guardian, as well as the locations where they would have likely been encountered. It's unknown why these plans were discarded, but with hindsight, it could have been either due to a lack of time or space constraints, or even just controlling the flow of the game. After all, the designers would have had to craft unique encounters that would have made use of those pairings, and beyond that, each of the Shrine Guardians would later be encountered within Memoria as well as the Crystal World. As the narrative of Final Fantasy IX developed, we got to learn more about Gaia, Terra, and Garland's maniacal master plan. A huge part of this was the attempted assimilation of Gaia, a necessary evil to ensure the survival of Terra. But due to Gaia not being an optimal target, the fusion failed, and the 2 planets would end up being joined together in an unfortunate way, with Terra warped inside Gaia, and many of Terra's locations shifted over to the surface of Gaia. These locations would be heaped in history, dating back thousands upon thousands of years, but while we would learn much about Terran history, much of Gaia's history pre-fusion was left unknown. That is, with the exception of one location, Chocobo's Paradise. As indicated by its name, Chocobo's Paradise would quite literally be a paradise, featuring grand architecture and bountiful land, all inhabited peacefully by Chocobos under the rule of the Fat Chocobo. While much of the location is shrouded in mystery within the game, we do learn by speaking to one of the local Chocobos that the paradise existed long before the disaster between Terra and Gaia, meaning it has to be well over 5,000 years old, and this would make it the oldest known location on Gaia, at least according to lore that's been divulged. What's most impressive though is that Chocobo's paradise managed to survive the cataclysm of Terra intact. And afterwards, it's suggested that the famous traveller Ibsen made his way there and taught the Chocobos how to play Tetramaster. In light of its long history, the unique architecture and lush landscapes, in some way Chocobo's paradise may possibly grant some insight as to what Gaia was like before the surface was damaged by Terra's attempted fusion and the Aether Tree's mist pollution. And for our last fact, we thought it would be interesting to take a dive into the deep connections that exist between Final Fantasy IX, theatre, and more specifically, Shakespeare. Shakespeare has served as the inspiration for numerous creative works, and it's for that reason that it's perhaps no surprise that Final Fantasy would also end up being influenced by the works of the great English poet and playwright. But what made this intriguing was just how far the influence extended. You would see character names, story elements, and narrative concepts all bear a striking resemblance, with examples including the Tantalus Theatre Troupe, the Prima Vista Theatre Ship, and characters like Marcus, Cinna, and Puck, whose names were taken from classic Shakespeare plays. Beyond that, there was also the Black Waltzes, and additionally, the classic motive of star-crossed lovers would be seen in the relationship between Princess Garnet and Zidane in light of their contrasting roles in society. This then fed into the visuals, as character designer Toshiyuki Itahana chose to combine the characters' shorter bodies with exaggerated body language to better showcase the motifs of theatre and stage. But out of all the in-game elements, I Want to Be Your Canary would perhaps be one of the most blatant allusions to Shakespeare. Said to have been written by Lord Avon, a nod to William Shakespeare's birthplace, the play would make several references to classic works like King Lear and Romeo and Juliet. Additionally, the play's very name would even be inspired by a famous line from Romeo. When looking at the significance of I Want to Be Your Canary, the sequencing would also be quite interesting. Final Fantasy IX would begin with the performance of the play, but it wouldn't have a proper conclusion due to the commotion on the Prima Vista during Tantalus' attempted kidnapping of Princess Garnet. This interruption would also be the inciting incident that would set off the main events of the game. Later on, during the game's ending, we would see the play performed once again, but this time it would conclude with Zidane and Garnet's reunion. In some ways, this could be seen as the play coming full circle, as the game would both begin and end with its performance. And with the final scene depicting the audience and the other main characters giving a round of applause to Zidane and Garnet on stage, this would further elevate the theatrical essence of Final Fantasy IX. And with that, we're done. Those were 7 pieces of trivia relating to Final Fantasy IX that we feel you might not have known. Though of course, I'm sure there are some amongst you who probably knew them all. What were some of the facts that stood out to you though? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and hit that subscribe button. Alright everyone, with that, this is Daryl signing out. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, Chris M. Walker, The Livestream, Elsa Claire Farron, Galstian Dikujata, Gregory, Justin Dent, Lord of Morning, and Zukan TDK, who are super special Onion Eye supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.